Hello, everyone, and welcome to another backstage interview for the Metals Investor Forum, for the silver edition of the Metals Investor Forum. Thanks for taking the time to dive a little deeper into the VanGold story. I've got James Anderson here with me and keen to ask him a few questions because since the forum, which was just last week, VanGold has been busy, including putting out a PEA, a preliminary economic assessment, on the new combined El Cubo, Pinguico mine milling operation. So that's a pretty significant event. James, why don't you start by talking us through sort of how much, you got that document ready in just a few months after, the opportunity to buy El Cubo came about. So talk about just that process and what needed to go into it, and the decisions that had to be made.
Sure. Okay. So thanks for having me on, Gwen. Good seeing you. With regards to the PEA and leading up to that. So we were talking with Endeavour Silver, about purchasing El Cubo for a number of months prior to making that announcement towards the end of December. And a lot of our own due diligence, which we got Bear Dolbear, the engineering firm, to help us with, and Bear Dolbear wrote a 37-page desktop review for us in October, towards the end of October, so that we could really look at this business about buying El Cubo and being able to take some of the material from Pinguico and processing it at El Cubo and kickstarting this as a mining enterprise. And more than anything, what we wanted to do was to make sure that if we're going to make this leap to be a producing silver and gold mining company and raise the money necessary to purchase that asset and develop doing development work necessary to be able to push material through that mill really soon, that we knew that we were going to be able to have a good general business model. Leading up to the purchase, or the announcement of the LOI on the 18th of December, we understood that the exchange and the rest of the regulators would need a 43-1 compliant document with our name on it. Those are the rules. So we could have just got one of those, but then internally we're thinking, well, that's going to cost us a bunch of money anyway. Why don't we up that game just a little bit? Why don't we create a PEA level document so that our friends from Bear Dolbear can actually produce a document that's going to help, so that we can flip through it and go, yeah, okay, that's a really good idea. We can have some input. They can have some suggestions. There were a number of them, maybe 6 representatives from Bear Dolbear down in Guanajuato for 4 days in November, preparing, all of this, going to the mill, going to Pinguico and El Cubo. So that was all going into it. And just, one last point on that for your listeners, if they don't know who or what Bear Dolbear is, this is a very long-lived engineering firm in the United States that does primarily mining engineering studies for governments and big companies and small companies. They trace their existence back to 1911. It's the oldest continuous mining engineering establishment in the world. So that's who we got to do this study. So
the other advantage of doing a PEA level study, as opposed to just generating a 43-101 to satisfy regulators, is that, you as a public company can't officially talk about, how many tons you're going to put through a mill until you've issued a report outlining what that is. So issuing this PEA really puts some lines in the sand that you can say, well, this is at least what we're going to do. And I say at least because PEAs are pretty basic documents versus the detail that actually goes into developing and operating a mine, right? They're sort of different ends of the spectrum, but it's a starting point. The PEA looks good. It certainly isn't, shiny out of the, blowing things out of the water. But I think that, and I wrote about this extensively in my letter yesterday, that to me speaks as much as anything to how many parts of this are evolving, right? So let's just capture a few bits of that. So something like the NPV, it came out with a net present value at a 5% discount of, I think, 32 million in that ballpark, which isn't a super high number, but NPV relates a lot to the scale of the resource. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. So yeah, let's talk about that. And I've had some comments back from shareholders about that very thing. But we start with this process with Pinguico having no resources. And we start this process having El Cubo having a small resource base that we're purchasing. That resource base quadrupled within this document. And I think that that's very, very positive. And basically what VanGold did was looked at the 2017 43101 that was published by Endeavor and say, well, those are the resources. This is how much has been mined.
Mhm.
All of that other material still exists, assuming that they mined, the measured material first and then the indicated material second. So where is all that material, and can we put that into an indicated and inferred resource? Yes, we can. I guess the other thing that I think I would want to comment on for the listeners is that if you've got an indicated or an inferred resource that is in northern Botswana somewhere, okay, that's one thing. If it's 500 yards away from a mill, from a 1,500 ton a day operating mill that was operating until 14 months ago, those resources are worth more. Those are resources that you can touch and feel and have a really good shot at moving through our mill within, from 6 months to 36 months out.
And then there's so by defining the resources that are there in an official document, you quadrupled that count. And then there's the potential, right? What more there could be. There's that underground stockpile at Pinguico that VanGold wasn't able to really include much of because of certainty requirements. And then there's exploration potential, right? So those are the two other resource side of the valuation things that are evolving.
Yeah, okay. So, and there's a lot of good points there. So all of these documents, all the PEAs and even PFSs to a certain degree, they are opinions, and they're opinions by intelligent engineers and geologists with regards to this expansion of the resource. We were very happy about that, and VanGold, that is a very conservative organization. They felt comfortable doing that. What they did not feel comfortable with was giving us full value, full size for our underground stockpile, right? And the rationale for that is because there have been some delays with us getting underneath that stockpile and sampling the bottom of that. That work is ongoing, and we will have additional news on that over the coming weeks. But nonetheless, at the point where they were signing off on the finished document, that work had not been done. They were comfortable in saying that the trenching that's been done on the surface of that stockpile, that they were able to come up with a smaller resource based on just 5 meters of extension from the surface of it. So, okay, fine. Once again, it's a PEA. Will that material be some of the first material through the mill? I don't know yet. There's a lot of moving parts. There's ample material on surface at Pinguico. There's ample material underground at El Cubo. And in the months ahead, as we refurbish the mill, we'll be making decisions, on the ground with the embedded engineers that we've got in this company about, okay, let's get a sequence together here. What's going to be mined first, and what is that sequence going to look like?
Let's wrap up with a question about your financing. When you first announced the financing related to this El Cubo acquisition, you announced 7.5 million Canadian. You ended up closing on almost 17 with that was upsized twice or 3 times. And so talk to me about the conversations that you had as that was going on, sort of the investors, how they see the value here. Obviously, there was lots of investors that saw value. So talk to me about, sort of the outlook that people were so interested in.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in terms of, I don't know, full description of how that evolved.
Oh.
And I don't want to get into too much finger pointing about, the regulators and the stock exchange, but it was not our plan A to have the thing halted for 6 weeks. That was something that was handed to us. What our original plan was to announce the acquisition of El Cubo, to announce the $7.5 million gold and silver loan facility, and then to let the stock trade. and let the stock trade, wherever it was going to
Re-rate
trade.
to whatever value the market thought it deserved with the new version of VanGold.
Correct. And then we would do an appropriate equity financing within the context of that market. Well, that didn't happen. And the shares were halted after, because they wanted to do a fundamental review. So in that moment, we said, well, really, we should do an equity financing. Okay, well, and this is on Christmas Eve, right? So how big would you like that equity financing to be? Well, okay, and so we made a decision to go with that. Investor sentiment, investor reaction to the financing has almost uniformly been, very, very positive. And I mean, I think I can say that pretty categorically because we have managed to upsize it. How big did it want to be? Did it want to go? There's a real balancing act, right? You're supposed to, in this business, take the money when there's money available. So there was that aspect of it that was involved in the decision-making process. Obviously, we didn't want to, blow up the capital structure entirely, but we're buying a significant asset here at a strike price for the financing that was higher than the last trade of the stock when it was halted, right? So the response has been overwhelmingly positive. We will close on that financing concurrently when we close the deal with Endeavor. So probably another 10 days. There's a lot of details when you close one of these things, Mexican tax rules and regs, and all kinds of closing conditions. So we're just working through all that with the lawyers here right now.
Exciting times. You have we could continue this conversation for an hour with the number of moving parts that there are at Pinguico and El Cubo, and where you're headed with VanGold over the next year. I don't think the team at MIF would appreciate if we make this an hour long. That wasn't the guidance that we were given. So.
Well, we'll have to find an hour somewhere else then.
Sounds good. That's a good touch on things. And if anybody wants more information, I'm sure you can find James very easily through the VanGold website or through MIF. And thanks for taking the time today, James.
Thanks very much, Gwen.